Hi everyone, thanks for watching this video. I'm Andres Ramos and I'm a PhD student of the Captain Astronomical Institute and ESROM in the Netherlands, and I'm going to talk about virtual workshops as a boost for science. So before start, we have to define what is a workshop. So a workshop can be defined in different ways, but the main idea is that it's a place where the people get together and create or acquire new knowledge about a specific issue. This is in general, but we are going to focus in a definition on science. So I use this definition from the Loret Center here in the Netherlands, where we can say that the workshops or the workshops that they do there are meetings where researchers can meet and discuss or work together on scientific developments, ideas, and plans in an open and interactive atmosphere. So with this idea in mind, I want to start with two problems of this kind of workshops. So the first one is the carbon footprint that we have as a researchers doing science. And I based this part in an article of Aachen in 2013, where they tried to find out how important it is, the carbon footprint, in a PhD project. So they find out that mobility actually represents that 74% of the climate change impact. But specifically for a PhD project, this can be around 40% of the total amount of the carbon that we produce during this project. So by just converting this physical travel time to video conferencing, the reduction could be significant. If you want to learn more about this, you can just watch the other video from Leonard Barcher here in the conference as well. Another problem from this kind of workshops is the inclusiveness. So how is the selection approach that we have to face for actually attending these workshops? So the current selection approach have different issues, like for example, only friends of friends are invited, or the criteria is not clear. There is a bias on the scientific organizing committee in the selection of the presentations. And sometimes there is not a completely transparency on this. But this bias selection is also related with diversity. So in terms of if we want to have diversity in our scientific environment, we have to take into account different aspects as culture, gender, geography, race, and even the position in the academic environment. This is kind of important, and I faced this for the first time in a conference 3 years ago, in a Python for Astronomy conference, where they tried to tackle these issues by creating a blind selection. So getting together the information from the participants and try to figure out which were the best selections or criteria to find out the people to participate in this kind of workshops. And that's when virtual workshops come from, because this is presential, but the thing is that virtual workshops can help these two problems that I showed you before, and in addition, boost science. And what do I mean by boost science? I mean that by using virtual workshops, we can have faster interaction between researchers, we have developed ideas and solve problems more easily, and we can use some tools specific dedicated for research that are known as a virtual research environments. All of this makes science open. And why open is important? Because that's the way to advance in science, to make it clear to everyone. And in these virtual workshops, the idea will be to implement open data and open materials to make it more transparent. But we know that unfortunately, not everything that is virtual is perfect. There are some problems like, for example, time zones, lack of social interaction. There is no a nice location for me to go there and visit. So there is not a reward for me to being here and just in front of the computer in my home. And there is also a problem of adaptation. Not all the people can just pretend that they are doing science while they are just sitting looking at a computer and listen to other people that is far away from each other. And finally, well, there is also the problem of privacy. So the thing is that with current tools and the ones that are in development, we can help to some of these problems. And this is where virtual research environments come from, because virtual research environments or science getaways or virtual laboratories in some other places of the world, that's how they call it, are kind of new and can help you to solve this problem in a virtual environment. So everything inside your computer. And if you implement these virtual research environments during a virtual workshop, you can have all the information that we want and we want to tackle and solve during these workshops. Here is some examples of this virtual research environment. Some of you may know it. But what they do is just try to put all the data, information, and at the same time create an environment where the researchers can talk to each other, can figure out how many correlations are by using analysis tools, and at the same time using other tools inside the research environments where they can publish. So this kind of open science tool helps you those four things. So store and organize data, do the social networking for the research, use the data analysis platforms, and at the end, publish your final or intermediate results, depending on what you pretend. And so it's a more cooperative science focus, open. So as an example of a virtual workshop using this virtual research environment, just imagine that you have you want to study a snail reproduction. So you do it in this virtual research environment, and during this workshop, someone of the public, so in this case the researchers, comes from Panama, and he says, oh, I have this problem with this snail, and I want to tackle this problem, but it's specific for Panama, and he is the one who has the samples of this kind of research. But fortunately, in this research environment, you can connect to other people. And by doing that connection, we can say like, oh, there is another researcher, this time from South Africa. He has some pictures from the same snail that he is looking to tackle the problem. And he wants to join forces, like to figure out what is happening. But it's not only that. There is another kind of researcher who has the two things. He has the samples of the snails and at the same time photography. So all of them collaborate and do all the research together in the virtual research environment. So they put all the information in the data in the research environment. They get together during 2-3 hours during the workshop, and they try to figure out what they have and what they can do. And if the data is good enough and the analysis can be done quite easily, at the end of the workshop, the publications can be done quite easily at the same time. So this kind of focus could help to boost science for these kind of problems. I mean, it's not going to be solvable for all the problems, but at least for some of them, it will be very possible to do it. But that's not all. Going beyond that just idea, we have to take into account that virtual reality is just a start. We have our VR sets and other things that can help us to connect virtually with other people. But in some cases, there is still like advancing. And that's why this conference is about. The other problem is that, well, there is no natural conversations at the moment, but it will take some time to make it possible, to make conversations as real as we can in the normal environments on virtual meetings and normal meetings or conferences. And at least from my point of view, why not to think about in oasis-like environments? So probably some of you may know the book and the movie that a few years ago was called Ready Player One, where they have this kind of virtual environments where they just have to put a headset and other things, and all of them are reproduced again in the virtual environment, and it's more simple to see like the face and the expression of the person who is having this virtual reality environment in it. And we also have to take into account that society is changing, and that's very important because adaptation is required when society changes. And this step of virtual reality is what we want, and is one step that science has to take to improve and make things faster and easier. One of the examples that you have seen here is the glue environment that I just knew like a week ago, and it's kind of interesting. So you can keep an eye on these things. So my idea of this discussion is that we could try to join together three different things: the virtual research environment, the virtual reality, and the virtual workshops, to create something that I call VR Square. So with this VR Square, we can make science cheaper, innovative, open, and inclusive. So just by trying to make these things real, we can make science more important, and at the same time, it will make boost science at the end. So if you have any questions or you want to talk with me, you can do it through the chat on the webpage. Thank you for listening. Bye.